My name is Ariana, 34 years old, and I'm standing in family court watching my parents sit on the opposite side with my sister Emma and my husband Marcus. The judge is asking about child support for an 18-month-old baby. My parents keep insisting I must do the right thing for family. Marcus won't even look at me. Emma's holding the baby like a shield. I grip the manila envelope containing evidence that will destroy their carefully constructed lies. 3 years ago, I thought I had the perfect life. They expected my silence, my compliance, my money. Before I continue the story, please let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how what I revealed in that courtroom changed absolutely everything. 3 years earlier, my life looked like something from a magazine spread. I was a successful marketing director at one of Boston's top firms, pulling in a comfortable six-figure salary and loving every minute of the challenging work. My husband Marcus worked as an investment banker at a prestigious firm downtown, and together we lived in a beautiful Beacon Hill brownstone that we'd bought and renovated ourselves. The exposed brick walls, the original hardwood floors, the marble kitchen island where we hosted dinner parties. Everything spoke of the life we'd built together over 5 years of marriage. My younger sister Emma was 28, then a struggling actress who'd moved to Boston from Los Angeles after another failed pilot season. She was beautiful in that delicate way that made everyone want to protect her, with long auburn hair and green eyes that could fill with tears at a moment's notice. She'd been staying in our guest room for what was supposed to be 2 weeks, but had stretched into 2 months, always having just missed an audition or callback that would have changed everything. Our parents, Dorothy and Richard, were retired high school teachers, living in a modest colonial in the suburbs. They'd always preached family values, responsibility, and the importance of taking care of each other. Sunday dinners at their house were mandatory, complete with mom's pot roast and dad's lectures about financial planning and moral obligations. They'd call these gatherings our sacred family time, where nothing could be more important than showing up for each other. Marcus had always been the golden son-in-law at these dinners. He'd help mom in the kitchen discuss investment strategies with dad, and most notably, he'd taken Emma under his wing during her career crisis. He'd drive her to auditions when I was working late, help her practice lines, even introduced her to some contacts in the entertainment industry through his clients. My parents couldn't stop singing his praises constantly, telling me how lucky I was to have married such a generous, family-oriented man. The red flags started small, so small. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Marcus began working late more frequently, always with perfectly reasonable explanations about difficult mergers or demanding international clients in different time zones. When I'd offer to wait up or bring him dinner at the office, he'd insist I needed my rest for my own demanding job. He was being considerate, I told myself. He was protecting me from his stress. Emma's financial situation never seemed to improve, yet somehow she started showing up with expensive handbags and designer shoes. When I questioned her about it, she'd wave her hand dismissively and mention some residual check from an old commercial or a gift from a grateful friend. She'd immediately follow up by asking to borrow money for rent or groceries. And I'd feel guilty for questioning her, especially when my parents would remind me that successful siblings had obligations to struggling ones. The night of our 5th anniversary should have been special. I'd made reservations at our favorite restaurant, bought a new dress, even left work early to get my hair done. Marcus arrived 2 hours late, apologizing profusely about a client emergency. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie askew, and when he kissed my cheek, I caught a whiff of perfume that wasn't mine. Emma had texted frantically that same evening about some emergency with her apartment, begging me to wire her money immediately. I did it from the restaurant bathroom while Marcus checked his phone constantly throughout our abbreviated dinner. When I received my promotion to vice president, complete with a substantial raise in stock options, I rushed home expecting celebration. Marcus barely looked up from his laptop, murmuring congratulations before returning to his screen. Emma, who happened to be over for dinner that night, immediately started talking about how my success meant I could help her more with her career transition. My parents called to say they were proud, but warned me not to let career success go to my head or affect my marriage. Mom specifically mentioned that Marcus might feel emasculated, and I should be sensitive to his feelings. Every Sunday dinner became an exercise in cognitive dissonance. Marcus and Emma would arrive separately, but always within minutes of each other. They'd sit at opposite ends of the table, but share these quick glances, I told myself, meant nothing. When Emma would laugh at Marcus's jokes, her hand would flutter to her throat in the specific way I'd never seen her do before. When she'd talk about her auditions, Marcus would know details I didn't remember sharing with him. My parents would beam at how well our family functioned, praising Marcus for treating Emma like the sister he never had. The exhaustion started weighing on me. I was working 60-hour weeks, managing our household, supporting Emma financially, attending every family function, and trying to maintain a marriage with an increasingly distant husband. When I suggested we needed time alone together, maybe a vacation without family obligations, Marcus accused me of being selfish. My parents agreed, reminding me that Emma was going through a vulnerable time and needed our support. Dad particularly emphasized how in strong families, the successful members lifted up those still finding their way. Looking back now, the pattern was so clear. Every time I started questioning things, they'd all rally to make me feel guilty, paranoid, or selfish. They'd weaponize my success against me, turn my achievements into obligations, my concerns into character flaws. I was the stable one, the responsible one, the one who had it all together, so how dare I complain about carrying everyone else's burdens? 6 months after that anniversary dinner, everything started accelerating toward disaster. We were gathered for our usual Sunday dinner when Emma stood up, placing her hand on her still flat stomach with a tremulous smile. The words seemed to hang in the air before crashing down around me. She was pregnant 3 months along, and the father was complicated. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes as she explained he was someone who couldn't be involved right now, someone whose situation made it impossible to be public about their relationship. My mother immediately rushed to embrace her tears, streaming down her face, as she promised Emma everything would be fine, that family would take care of family. My father nodded solemnly, already calculating costs and logistics in his retired teacher's mind. Their eyes turned to me almost simultaneously, that expectant look I'd seen so many times before when Emma needed rescuing. Marcus sat frozen beside me, his knuckles white as he gripped his wineglass, completely silent for once. I heard myself offering our guest room again, suggesting Emma move in with us through the pregnancy and early months with the baby. It made sense, I reasoned aloud, since she was already staying over so frequently. The words felt automatic, programmed by years of being the responsible older sister. Marcus immediately objected, his voice sharp and unlike him. He cited our work schedules, the need for quiet, the impossibility of having a newborn in our home. The vehemence of his reaction surprised everyone, including me. Strange incidents began piling up faster than I could explain them away. Emma would make Marcus's coffee in the morning without asking how he took it, getting the exact ratio of cream to sugar perfect every time. When I commented on it, she laughed and said she'd learned from watching me, except I'd never made his coffee in front of her, because he always left before she woke up. She knew he preferred his eggs over easy, that he was allergic to shellfish, but not regular fish, that he got migraines from red wine, but not white. Details accumulated like evidence I wasn't ready to examine. One evening, I found one of Emma's earrings on my bedroom floor, a distinctive silver hoop she'd worn to dinner the night before. When I returned it to her, she barely glanced at it, before saying it must have fallen when she borrowed that dress last week. I hadn't loaned her any dress. When I pointed this out, she laughed and said pregnancy brain was making her confused, even though she'd only just found out she was pregnant. Marcus jumped in to say Emma had borrowed one of my scarves. She must be mixing things up. The business trips escalated dramatically. Marcus was suddenly needed in New York every other week, Chicago, once a month, Miami, for a conference that apparently only he could attend. His expense reports, which I accidentally saw when looking for our tax documents, showed charges for restaurants and hotels that seemed excessive for one person. When I questioned the company credit card statement showing 2 dinners at the same restaurant on the same night, he had ready explanations about client entertainment and team buildings. Emma's pregnancy cravings mysteriously aligned with Marcus's favorite foods. She desperately needed Thai food from the specific place he loved across town. She could only stomach the exact brand of pickles he kept hidden in the back of our refrigerator. The pregnancy made her crave his mother's specific Italian sauce recipe, which she somehow knew despite never meeting his mother. Every coincidence felt like another piece of a puzzle I was assembling in the dark. My parents increased their pressure exponentially as Emma's pregnancy progressed. They insisted I pay for her prenatal care since she didn't have insurance. They expected me to cover her apartment rent so she could maintain independence. They wanted me to start a college fund immediately. When I suggested the father should contribute, they became angry, accusing me of being heartless toward my pregnant sister. My mother actually said the words that would echo in my mind later, that sometimes being family meant accepting situations we didn't fully understand. The night I caught Marcus deleting texts at 2 in the morning became a turning point in my slowly dawning realization. I'd woken up to use the bathroom and saw him hunched over his phone, rapidly deleting message after message. When he noticed me, he immediately said it was work stuff, confidential client information that couldn't be stored on personal devices. His explanation was smooth, practiced, delivered without hesitation. But his eyes couldn't meet mine, and his hands shook slightly as he set the phone aside. I suggested marriage counseling the next morning. Marcus's reaction was immediate and harsh. He accused me of being paranoid of letting work stress affect our relationship, of manufacturing problems where none existed. He brought my parents into it, calling them while I was sitting right there, telling them I was having some kind of breakdown. They arrived within an hour, my mother clutching her purse and my father wearing his disappointed professor face. Together, they staged what felt like an intervention about my trust issues and how they were hurting our family. Emma's baby shower was the event that finally cracked my denial wide open. She'd planned it at a country club neither of us could afford, insisting a friend had connections. During the games portion, she told a story about Marcus's childhood that I'd never heard, about how he'd broken his arm falling from a tree trying to rescue a cat. She knew the name of the cat, the age he'd been, the specific hospital where he'd been treated. When I asked Marcus about it later, he claimed he must have mentioned it to her during one of their drives to auditions. But I knew Marcus well enough to know he never shared personal stories with anyone except me, or so I'd thought. The feeling of being gaslit by everyone I loved was suffocating. Every concern was met with accusations of jealousy or mental instability. Every question was turned into evidence of my failing as a wife and sister. Every boundary I tried to set was portrayed as selfishness. They formed this united front against my suspicions, making me feel like I was losing my mind. Even my friends started hearing from Emma about how worried she was about my mental state, how I was becoming paranoid and aggressive toward her innocent pregnancy. But gut feelings have a way of persisting despite gaslighting, and mine was screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. I started paying attention differently, not trying to catch them, but simply observing without the filter of trust I'd always applied. The truth was there in plain sight once I stopped explaining it away. Marcus's hand lingering on Emma's back a second too long. The way Emma's face lit up when Marcus entered a room. The choreographed dance of their interactions, too careful to be casual, too synchronized to be coincidence. 1 month before Emma's due date, the universe handed me the truth in the most mundane way possible. My flight from a business conference in Atlanta got canceled due to weather. Instead of staying overnight as planned, I caught a red eye that got me home at 7 in the morning instead of that evening. I hadn't told Marcus because I'd wanted to surprise him, maybe try to recapture something of what we'd lost. The house should have been empty since Marcus had a breakfast meeting in New York, or so his calendar had indicated. His car in the driveway was the first sign something was off. Maybe his meeting had been canceled too, I thought, though he hadn't mentioned it when we'd spoken the night before. I entered through the back door quietly, not wanting to wake him if he was sleeping in. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. There were 2 coffee cups on the counter, both still warm. Emma's purse was on the kitchen island, her keys beside it. The voices drifting down from upstairs were clear enough that I didn't need to strain to hear them. They weren't even trying to be quiet. Emma's distinctive laugh, the one she used when she was genuinely happy rather than performing, floated through the air. Marcus's voice, warm and intimate, in a way I hadn't heard in months, responded to something she said. I climbed the stairs slowly, my phone already recording in my hand, some primitive instinct for evidence overriding my shock. Our bedroom door was partially open. Through the gap, I could see them sitting on the bed I'd shared with Marcus for 5 years. Emma, 7 months pregnant, was wearing my robe, the silk one Marcus had given me for our anniversary. Marcus was in boxers, and nothing else, his hand resting on her swollen belly. They were discussing plans for after the baby arrived, their voices casual and comfortable, like they'd had this conversation 100 times before. Marcus was promising to handle me, those were his exact words. He said the divorce would be quick once he presented it right, that I was too proud to fight for a marriage where I'd been betrayed. Emma worried about money, about maintaining their lifestyle. Marcus assured her that my assets, my beautiful salary, and stock options would be split in the divorce. He actually used the phrase marital assets while planning to steal half of everything I'd worked for. The revelation that they'd been together since before Emma's supposed career crisis hit like a physical blow. Marcus mentioned their anniversary 2 years ago next month, when they'd first gotten together at that conference in Miami I hadn't been able to attend. Emma laughed about how clever they'd been using her fake career struggles to explain her constant presence in our home. They'd been having an affair under my roof in my bed while I was at work supporting all of us. The confrontation that followed was both explosive and pathetically predictable. When I pushed open the door, phone still recording, they didn't even have the decency to look properly shocked. Marcus immediately went into damage control mode, claiming I was misunderstanding, that they'd just been talking, that Emma had been upset and he was comforting her. Even caught literally in my bedroom half naked with my pregnant sister, he was trying to gaslight me. Emma started crying, but not the pretty tears she used for manipulation. These were ugly sobs, as she claimed love just happened, that they tried to fight it, that I couldn't understand, because I'd never really loved Marcus the way she did. When I demanded a paternity test, they both refused vehemently, which told me everything I needed to know. Marcus switched tactics, admitting to an affair, but insisting the baby couldn't be his, that Emma had other boyfriends, that he'd made a mistake, but we could work through it. The lies came so easily, each more insulting than the last. Emma accused me of trying to ruin her pregnancy with stress, actually attempting to make me the villain, while sitting in my bed wearing my robe carrying my husband's baby. I packed methodically while they watched, taking only what was mine, before the marriage, leaving everything we'd built together. Marcus threatened to destroy me if I left, saying no one would believe me, that he'd make sure I lost everything in the divorce. Emma begged me to think about the baby, to not break up our family over something that just happened. The level of delusion was staggering. They'd been planning this for 2 years, but somehow it had just happened. My best friend Catherine had been suspicious for months, but hadn't wanted to upset me without proof. When I arrived at her door with 2 suitcases and a shattered expression, she didn't say "I told you so." She made tea, called in sick to work, and helped me find a divorce lawyer that same day. Her guest room became my sanctuary, while I tried to process the complete destruction of my life as I'd known it. The calls from my parents started within hours. Marcus had reached them first, with his version painting me as unstable and jealous of Emma's pregnancy. When I told them the truth, their response broke something fundamental inside me. They knew. They'd known something was going on, but chosen to believe it would work itself out. My mother actually said that Emma needed stability for the baby, and I had a good job, as if my financial success meant I should bankroll my husband and sister's love child. My father added that Marcus had made a mistake, but was still my husband. That divorce wasn't the answer, that keeping the family together was more important than my pride. The realization that my parents had enabled and even encouraged this betrayal was almost worse than the affair itself. They'd chosen Emma and Marcus over me, chosen the facade of family harmony over their daughter's well-being. Every Sunday dinner, every family gathering, every moment they'd praised Marcus while knowing he was sleeping with both their daughters became retroactively poisoned. They hadn't just failed to protect me, they'd actively participated in the deception. The divorce proceedings began with Marcus immediately going on the offensive, exactly as he'd promised. He claimed I'd abandoned the marriage, leaving him emotionally devastated and unable to work. Despite his 6-figure salary, he filed for alimony, citing the lifestyle I'd accustomed him to, and his current emotional distress preventing him from maintaining employment. His lawyer painted me as a cold, career-obsessed woman who'd driven him into the arms of someone who could provide emotional warmth. Emma officially named me in family court documents as the aunt who'd promised to support her child. She submitted text messages where I'd offered help, conveniently edited to remove context. She had witnesses, our parents, who testified that I'd repeatedly promised to take care of family, that I'd been planning to help raise the baby before I'd arbitrarily changed my mind. The level of coordination in their attack was stunning. Marcus began hiding assets with sophisticated precision. Money disappeared from our joint accounts into investments I couldn't trace. His salary allegedly decreased due to performance issues related to our separation. He claimed depression and anxiety, producing doctor's notes that excused him from work, while he demanded I pay for his mental health treatment. Meanwhile, Emma's apartment in Back Bay, which none of us could explain how she afforded, continued to be paid for by mysterious benefactors. I hired a private investigator on Catherine's recommendation, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial fraud and divorce cases. What she uncovered over 3 weeks was a masterpiece of deception. Marcus hadn't just been hiding assets, he'd been building an entirely separate financial life for 2 years. There were accounts in the Cayman Islands cryptocurrency wallets and investment properties held through shell companies. The total came to nearly $800,000 money he'd siphoned from his bonuses and our joint investments. The investigation revealed Emma's lifestyle was entirely funded by Marcus through a complex web of transactions designed to look like casting agency payments and commercial residuals. Her apartment lease was in the name of one of Marcus's shell companies. Her car payments came from an account linked to his supposed business consulting side venture. Every designer handbag and expensive meal had been paid for with money stolen from our marriage, while I was working myself to exhaustion to support what I thought was our future. Marcus's family reached out to me through the investigator, his mother particularly. She'd suspected something when Emma had answered Marcus's phone during a family call, but Marcus had convinced her Emma was just helping during a medical emergency I'd had. His parents offered to testify on my behalf, disgusted by their son's behavior and embarrassed they'd been deceived. His sister Jennifer provided emails where Marcus had bragged about his plan to get everything in the divorce because I was too proud to fight dirty. My coworkers had noticed my weight loss and exhaustion during this period. My boss, a woman who'd been through her own brutal divorce, quietly adjusted my workload and connected me with the company's legal insurance benefits I hadn't known existed. My team rallied around me covering presentations when I had court dates and keeping my professional life stable while my personal life imploded. The contrast between the support from relative strangers and the betrayal from family was stark. Catherine proved invaluable beyond just emotional support. She researched legal precedents, organized evidence, and even discovered that Massachusetts had specific laws about fraud in divorce proceedings that could result in criminal charges. She found cases where hiding assets had resulted in jail time, which gave my lawyer significant leverage. She also connected me with a support group for women going through high-conflict divorces, where I learned I wasn't alone in facing this level of coordinated betrayal. The discovery phase revealed the true timeline of Marcus and Emma's deception. Text messages recovered from Marcus's work phone showed they'd been planning this transition for over 2 years. They'd actually strategized about when Emma should get pregnant to maximize financial benefit in the divorce. There were spreadsheets calculating how much they could get from me in alimony and child support. Emma had researched my company's stock vesting schedule to time their reveal for maximum financial impact. Rachel, one of Emma's former friends, came forward with additional evidence after seeing Emma's social media posts playing victim. She had screenshots from Emma's private Instagram account showing the real relationship timeline photos of Marcus and Emma together at hotels when he was supposedly traveling for work. Emma had bragged to her friend group about securing her future by getting pregnant with a rich man's baby, calling me an easy mark who'd been financing their relationship without knowing it. Security footage from Marcus's office building proved devastating to his claims of working late. The cameras showed Emma arriving minutes after I'd leave for the day, staying until just before I typically got home. The security guards testified they'd assumed Emma was a client, though they'd found it odd she visited so frequently. The parking garage footage showed Marcus's car leaving with 2 occupants on nights he'd claimed to be working alone until midnight. My parents attempted to force mediation through our family pastor, actually bringing him to the courthouse to guilt me into dropping the proceedings. They stood there in the hallway, my mother crying about destroying the family, my father lecturing about forgiveness and Christian values. The pastor who'd known me since childhood tried to convince me that keeping the family together was more important than worldly concerns like money or fidelity. I walked past them without a word, my lawyer threatening harassment charges if they continued. The evidence mounted so overwhelmingly that Marcus's lawyer requested multiple continuances to address each new revelation. The hidden accounts, the shell companies, the coordinated financial fraud. It all painted a picture of deliberate calculating deception that no amount of gaslighting could explain away. Emma's pregnancy became a liability, rather than the sympathy card they'd expected to play. The judge grew increasingly frustrated with their attempts to delay and manipulate the proceedings. The final court date arrived on a cold February morning with the kind of sharp wind that cut through even the warmest coat. The courtroom was packed with extended family I hadn't seen in years, all drawn by the scandal that had torn through our conservative family like wildfire. My parents sat directly behind Emma and Marcus, their presence a visual statement of whose side they'd chosen. Emma held her baby, now 3 months old, dressed in an outfit I recognized from the boutique baby store where I used to shop for friends' shower gifts. Judge Patricia Thornton, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, reviewed the child support petition with obvious skepticism. Emma's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit Marcus couldn't afford if he was truly broke, argued passionately about my moral obligation to support my sister's child. He painted a picture of a wealthy woman abandoning her pregnant sister out of jealousy and spite, leaving an innocent baby to suffer for adult conflicts. My parents took the stand as star witnesses for Emma and Marcus. My mother testified tearfully about how I'd promised from childhood to always take care of my little sister, how I'd been the one to suggest Emma move to Boston, how I'd offered financial support multiple times. She conveniently forgot to mention that those offers were made before I knew Emma was sleeping with my husband. My father provided spreadsheets he'd created showing my financial capacity to support Emma's child, while maintaining my lifestyle, actually suggesting a payment plan that would take 60% of my income. Marcus testified about his inability to pay due to career destruction caused by our divorce. He claimed my actions had made him unemployable in Boston's financial sector, that the stress had caused a breakdown requiring intensive therapy he couldn't afford. His performance was compelling, complete with breaking voice, and barely contained tears. If I hadn't seen the evidence of his hidden wealth, I might have almost believed him myself. Emma sobbed through her testimony about being a struggling single mother abandoned by her sister, who'd promised to help raise the baby she'd been so excited about. When my lawyer called our first witness, the energy in the room shifted. The private investigator took the stand with a briefcase full of documented evidence. She methodically presented bank records showing Marcus's $800,000 in hidden assets, explaining how each transaction had been designed to appear legitimate while funneling money away from our marital assets. The projected slides showing the money trail were devastating, each one making Marcus sink lower in his chair. The investigation revealed Marcus's continued employment and bonuses throughout his claimed breakdown. Pay stubs, direct deposit records, and testimony from his company's HR department proved he'd never missed a day of work, had actually received a promotion during our separation, and was currently earning more than he ever had during our marriage. His claims of emotional devastation were undermined by travel records showing vacations to Bermuda and Aspen, with Emma during his supposed mental health crisis. Emma's luxury purchases during her claimed poverty were documented in excruciating detail. The investigator presented credit card statements showing $1,000 shopping sprees at Neiman Marcus weekly spa treatments and restaurant bills that exceeded what she claimed to spend on monthly groceries. The boutique baby furniture in her apartment, which I'd seen in photos on social media, totaled more than most people's annual salaries. Every purchase traced back to accounts connected to Marcus through the shell companies. Rachel took the stand next Emma's former friend, who'd grown disgusted with the deception. She testified about Emma's bragging, providing printed screenshots of messages where Emma called me pathetic for not noticing the affair happening in my own home. The most damaging was a voice message Rachel had saved where Emma laughed about how she was set for life because Massachusetts divorce laws would give her access to my money through Marcus. The courtroom was silent as Emma's recorded voice explained her pregnancy timing strategy to maximize financial gain. When video evidence from neighborhood security cameras was presented showing Marcus and Emma entering my house while I was traveling for work, using their own key, the facade began cracking. The footage showed them carrying overnight bags clearly comfortable and familiar with sneaking around. One particularly damaging clip showed them in my backyard pool, Emma wearing my swimsuit, Marcus grilling on the barbecue I'd bought him for his birthday. They'd been playing house in my home while I was working to pay for it. My parents shifted uncomfortably as evidence mounted that contradicted their testimony. When bank records showed they'd received money from Marcus to help with Emma's expenses, money that came from our joint accounts. Without my knowledge, my mother's face went white. They'd been taking what was essentially my money from Marcus to give to Emma, then asking me to contribute more on top of it. The judge asked them directly if they'd known about the source of the funds. Their silence was admission enough. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand with the manila envelope I'd been carrying. My lawyer had saved this evidence for maximum impact, knowing it would destroy any remaining credibility Marcus and Emma had. Inside were DNA test results I'd obtained through a court order after the baby was born. Marcus had fought the test viciously, but the judge had ruled it necessary given the financial implications. The results showed with 99.9% certainty that Marcus was the father of Emma's baby. But that wasn't the only document in the envelope. I also had a marriage certificate from Las Vegas dated 2 months prior, showing Marcus and Emma had legally married while our divorce was still pending. They'd committed bigamy, making Marcus's marriage to Emma invalid and potentially criminal. The certificate had been discovered by the investigator in Clark County records during a routine asset search. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Marcus tried to object, his lawyer frantically whispering about procedural violations, but Judge Thornton threatened contempt if he interrupted again. Emma broke down completely. Not pretty tears, but ugly, desperate sobs as she admitted everything. Yes, they'd been together for years. Yes, they'd planned the pregnancy. Yes, they'd gotten married thinking it would strengthen their position for custody and financial arrangements. Yes, they'd conspired with my parents to paint me as unstable and selfish. The judge's expression throughout was one of barely contained fury at the waste of court resources and the attempted fraud. She dismissed all claims against me with prejudice, meaning they could never be refiled. She ordered Marcus to pay all my legal fees, which had reached into 6 figures, due to his. Judge Thornton's ruling was swift and merciless. She dismissed every claim against me with prejudice, ensuring Marcus and Emma could never pursue me for financial support again. She ordered Marcus to pay all my legal fees plus damages for fraudulent concealment of assets. The hidden money was to be divided according to Massachusetts law, with penalties that gave me 70% of the discovered funds. Marcus's face went from red to white as the judge detailed how his fraud had backfired spectacularly. The divorce decree was modified to reflect the new evidence. Instead of the alimony Marcus had sought, he now owed me a substantial settlement from his hidden assets. The judge noted that his continued employment and higher salary meant he was fully capable of supporting Emma and their child without my involvement. She also referred the bigamy case to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution, stating that such flagrant disregard for law couldn't be ignored. Emma and Marcus were forced to publicly acknowledge their legal marriage in court, destroying the narrative of Emma as an abandoned single mother. The judge ordered them to correct any false statements made to social services or other agencies where Emma had claimed single-parent status for benefits. The financial advantages they'd sought to gain through deception evaporated as they faced potential fraud charges for false claims made during the proceedings. Outside the courthouse, my parents approached me with tears streaming down their faces. My mother reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back, maintaining physical distance that matched the emotional chasm between us. She started apologizing, saying they'd been fooled, that they hadn't understood the full situation. My father stood silent, unable to meet my eyes, the weight of their choices finally crushing his perpetual certainty about family obligations. My response was calm and measure delivered without anger or emotion. I told them they'd chosen to believe strangers over their own daughter, had enabled the destruction of my marriage, and my trust had participated in trying to financially destroy me for the benefit of the people who'd betrayed me. There was no screaming, no drama, just a clear statement that they'd made their choice and now had to live with the consequences. I walked away while they called after me, their pleas echoing off the courthouse steps. 6 months after that court date, my life had transformed completely. I'd accepted a senior vice president position with a tech startup in Seattle, as far from Boston and my family as I could get while remaining in the country. The salary was even better, the stock options promising, and most importantly, Nobody there knew about my past. I could walk into rooms without whispers following, could make friends without them Googling my family drama. I met James at a charity fundraiser for local animal shelters. He was a veterinarian who ran a practice specializing in rescue animals, quiet and steady in ways Marcus had never been. He knew my story because I told him on our third date, wanting to filter out anyone who couldn't handle complicated pasts. His response was to share his own story of family betrayal involving a brother and an inheritance. We bonded over understanding that family could wound deeper than strangers ever could. Meanwhile, reports filtered back through mutual acquaintances about Marcus and Emma's situation. His company had fired him after the court proceedings became public, citing ethical violations and moral clauses in his contract. The bigamy charges hadn't resulted in jail time, but had destroyed his reputation in Boston's tight financial community. Emma's dreams of being supported while pursuing acting were shattered as they struggled to pay legal fees and maintain even a modest lifestyle. My parents reached out monthly with letters, emails, voicemails I deleted without reading or listening to. Extended family members who'd attended the trial reached out with support and horror at what they'd witnessed. Aunt Margaret confessed she'd suspected something at family gatherings, but had been shut down by my parents whenever she'd tried to voice concerns. Cousin Jennifer shared stories of how my parents had always favored Emma, making excuses for her failures while demanding perfection from me. Therapy became my twice-weekly commitment to healing. My therapist specialized in betrayal trauma and family estrangement. Through our sessions, I began understanding the patterns that had been established in childhood, how I'd been groomed to be the responsible one, the fixer, the one who sacrificed for others' comfort. The fog of guilt lifted as I recognized the manipulation tactics that had kept me trapped in toxic dynamics for decades. I started a nonprofit organization called Phoenix Rising, supporting people dealing with familial betrayal and financial abuse in divorce. The first meeting had 3 attendees. Within a year, we had chapters in 6 cities and an online support group with thousands of members. Sharing my story publicly through the organization helped others recognize their own situations and find strength to stand up for themselves. Speaking engagements at conferences about financial protection and recognizing manipulation became part of my healing journey. I discovered that my story, while extreme, wasn't unique. The patterns of betrayal, the gaslighting, the family enabling, appeared in countless variations. Women and men approached me after speeches with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving them permission to protect themselves from family members who'd weaponized love and obligation against them. My chosen family grew stronger than my biological one had ever been. Catherine visited Seattle quarterly. Our friendship deepened by weathering the storm together. James's family welcomed me with warmth that never felt conditional or transactional. His parents, Sandra and Robert, included me in family gatherings without expectation or judgment. His sister Lisa became the sister I'd actually wanted, someone who celebrated my successes, rather than plotting to steal them. Work became a source of joy again rather than escape. Without the constant drain of supporting everyone else, I could focus on innovation and leadership. My team respected me for my competence, not knowing or caring about my family drama. The startup went public 2 years after I joined, and my stock options meant I'd never have to worry about money again, though I'd learned money couldn't buy family loyalty anyway. 1 year after the trial, I encountered Emma at a Whole Foods in Seattle during a business trip she was apparently taking. She was with the toddler, looking exhausted and years older than her actual age. She approached me near the produce section, the child on her hip reaching for the bright oranges. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced with practical clothes that had seen better days. The confident manipulation had been replaced with genuine desperation. She tried to guilt me with the child saying he was my nephew, that he deserved to know his aunt. She talked about how hard everything had been, how Marcus had changed after losing his job, how our parents couldn't help much on their fixed income. The words were familiar, the same emotional manipulation she'd always used, just delivered with less polish. The child was innocent in all of it, but I'd learned that protecting myself meant maintaining boundaries even when children were involved. My response was polite but firm. I wished her well, but stated clearly that we were no longer family. The choices she and Marcus had made, supported by our parents, had severed those bonds permanently. I didn't owe her or her child anything, regardless of blood relations. The little boy looked at me with Marcus's eyes, and I felt nothing but sadness for the legacy of deception he'd been born into. As I walked away, she called after me about forgiveness, about moving forward, about being the bigger person. The old me might have stopped, might have felt guilty, might have given in to the manipulation. But therapy had taught me that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, that being the bigger person didn't mean being a doormat, that moving forward sometimes meant leaving people behind. James texted while I was in the parking lot asking about dinner plans and sending a photo of a rescue puppy he'd operated on that day. The contrast between his simple, genuine care and the complex manipulation I'd just encountered reinforced every decision I'd made. Real love didn't require sacrifice of self, didn't demand you set yourself on fire to keep others warm, didn't use obligation as currency. Looking back now from a place of peace and stability, I can trace the patterns that led to that courtroom confrontation. The foundation was laid in childhood, when Emma learned that tears and helplessness got her what she wanted, while I learned that achievement and responsibility got me praise. Our parents created a dynamic where my success became Emma's safety net, where my accomplishments were family property, to be redistributed as they saw fit. The most insidious part was how they'd wrapped it all in the language of love and family values. Every boundary I tried to set was selfishness. Every question I asked was distrust. Every moment of exhaustion was weakness. They'd created a system where I could never give enough, never sacrifice enough, never be depleted enough to satisfy their definition of being a good family member. My therapist called it emotional vampirism, dressed up as family obligation. Understanding that my parents had likely faced similar dynamics in their own families helped explain, but not excuse, their behavior. My mother's constant need to maintain surface harmony came from growing up in a household where conflict meant violence. My father's rigid ideas about family responsibility stemmed from being parentified as the oldest of 7 children. They'd perpetuated cycles they'd never examined, sacrificing one daughter to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about the other. The specific moment I recognized the scapegoat dynamic was during a therapy session about childhood memories. Every family story positioned me as the responsible one, and Emma as the one who needed protecting. When I'd won academic awards, the celebration was brief before discussion turned to how Emma felt overshadowed. When Emma failed classes, the focus was on how I could tutor her despite my own heavy course load. The pattern was so consistent, it seemed designed, though I doubt my parents consciously planned it. Learning about narcissistic family systems revealed that Emma likely developed her manipulative traits as survival mechanisms in the dysfunctional dynamic our parents created. She'd learned early that producing drama got attention, that victimhood got resources, that tears got her way. Marcus, attracted to someone he could position as needing saving, while secretly controlling, had been perfect for her needs. Together, they'd identified me as the resource to exploit, enabled by parents who'd already established that pattern. Therapy also revealed my own complicity in maintaining these dynamics. I derived identity and worth from being needed, from solving problems, from being the stable one everyone could depend on. The harder things got, the more I doubled down on being responsible, as if I could earn real love through sufficient sacrifice. It took losing everything I'd built to realize that love earned through depletion wasn't love at all. The support group I founded became a laboratory for understanding these patterns across different families and cultures. The details varied, but the structures remained consistent. There was always a scapegoat whose resources, emotional, financial, or both, were considered communal property. There was always a golden child whose needs superseded everyone else's. There were always enablers who maintained the system through guilt and manipulation. And there was always a moment of revelation that threatened to collapse the entire structure. Some members had discovered affairs like mine. Others had found out about stolen inheritances, fabricated illnesses, or elaborate deceptions about money. But everyone shared the experience of family choosing the perpetrators over the victims, of being gaslit, when they tried to establish boundaries, of being painted as the villain, when they finally said enough. The universality of these experiences suggested something deeper about how families can become systems of exploitation rather than support. My new life in Seattle represented more than geographical distance. It was psychological and emotional freedom from the constant drain of toxic family dynamics. I could have a bad day without someone using it as evidence of selfishness. I could celebrate successes without immediately calculating who would demand a share. I could exist without the constant weight of other people's expectations and entitlements. James and I built our relationship on radically different foundations than my marriage to Marcus. We maintained separate finances by choice, not suspicion. We supported each other's goals without sacrificing our individual identities. When his family needed help, we discussed it together and set clear boundaries about what we could and couldn't do. There was no guilt, no manipulation, just honest communication about capacity and desire to help. The nonprofit work revealed how many people struggled with the guilt of estrangement, especially from parents. Society's narrative that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you only get one family, keeps people trapped in abusive dynamics. We created resources for navigating holidays, responding to flying monkeys, and maintaining no contact boundaries. The original blood is thicker than water, quote actually says, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, meaning chosen bonds are stronger than family ones. Speaking at conferences led to consulting work with divorce attorneys about recognizing financial abuse patterns and family enabling of infidelity. I developed frameworks for identifying when entire family systems were aligned against one member, usually the most financially successful one. The patterns were so predictable that we created assessment tools lawyers could use during initial consultations to identify potential complex family dynamics. 3 years after the trial, I received a letter from my father through my lawyer. He was dying of cancer and wanted to reconcile before the end. The letter was full of regret and recognition of how they'd failed me. He admitted they'd known about Marcus and Emma's relationship almost from the beginning, but had convinced themselves it would work out if I never knew. He apologized for choosing the easier path of enabling rather than the harder path of truth. I chose not to respond or visit. Some might see that as cold, but I saw it as self-preservation. Deathbed reconciliations might provide comfort for the dying, but they don't erase years of betrayal or magically heal trauma. My father had years to choose differently to stand up for me to tell the truth. He'd chosen Emma and Marcus, and maintaining the facade instead. His terminal diagnosis didn't obligate me to provide absolution he'd never sought, when it might have cost him something. My mother's attempts at contact increased after his death. She painted herself as a grieving widow who'd lost both her husband and daughter. Family members were recruited to pressure me about attending the funeral, about supporting my mother in her grief, about letting go of the past. But the past wasn't a single event to let go of. It was years of chosen betrayal, enabled abuse, and participated deception. Grief didn't erase complicity. I didn't attend the funeral, but donated to a cancer research foundation in his name. It felt like the right balance of acknowledging his death without pretending we'd had a relationship worth mourning. Emma and Marcus attended, according to cousins who reported back. They were still together, but visibly struggling the glamour of their stolen romance, replaced with the reality of financial stress and social ostracism. The final revelation came from my father's will. He'd left everything to Emma and her child, explicitly stating it was to make up for my refusal to support them. Even in death, he'd chosen them over me, used his last act to punish me for not accepting abuse. My mother contested nothing supported this final betrayal. It was actually liberating, the last proof I needed that no contact had been the right choice. Today, 5 years after that courtroom confrontation, I can barely remember feeling obligated to support people who were actively betraying me. The therapy, the distance, the new life I've built have overwritten those old programs. When people share similar stories in support groups, I remember the feelings, but they don't control me anymore. The scar tissue is strong and protective rather than painful. James and I married last spring in a small ceremony with 20 guests, all chosen family, who'd proven their loyalty through actions, not blood. Catherine was my maid of honor. My team from work attended. James's family filled the roles my biological family had abdicated. The ceremony was about celebrating what we'd built, not performing for people who didn't wish us well. The photos showed genuine joy rather than staged harmony. We're considering children, something I couldn't have imagined during the worst of the betrayal. But watching James's family, seeing how they support, without enabling how they love, without conditions, how they celebrate each other's successes, has shown me that healthy families are possible. We've discussed extensively how we'll protect any children from toxic family dynamics, including what we'll tell them about why they only have one set of grandparents. The business success I've achieved since leaving Boston exceeds anything I'd accomplished while carrying my family's weight. Without the constant drain on my resources and energy, I've been able to take risks, innovate, and lead with clarity. The company I helped build is changing how people access mental health resources. The irony that my trauma led to helping others heal isn't lost on me. Sometimes I wonder what Emma tells her son about why he doesn't know his aunt, what Marcus says about why he lost everything, what my mother tells herself about losing a daughter. But these wonderings are brief and without emotional weight. Their stories are their burdens to carry. I'm no longer responsible for managing their narratives or protecting them from consequences of their choices. The most powerful lesson from this journey is that family isn't obligatory. It's not blood or legal documents or shared history. Family is consistent care, mutual respect, reciprocal support, and genuine love that doesn't demand self-destruction as payment. Family chooses you back every single day through actions, not words. Family doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm or drown yourself to keep them afloat. When people ask if I regret cutting off my family, I tell them I regret how long it took me to recognize the abuse. I regret the years spent believing their gaslighting. I regret the money, time, and emotional energy wasted on people who were actively plotting against me. But I don't regret the boundary setting, the no contact decision, or the life I've built without them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who refuse to love you properly. This story started with me standing in a courtroom gripping evidence that would expose years of deception. But it really began decades earlier, when a family decided one daughter's needs mattered more than the other's well-being. It took losing everything I thought I had to gain everything I actually needed. The marriage I lost was built on lies. The family I lost had never truly been mine. But the life I gained, the real love I found, the chosen family I built, those are worth more than any inheritance or approval from people who prove themselves incapable of genuine love. To anyone reading this who sees their own story reflected in mine, know that the guilt does fade, the fog does clear, the wounds do heal. And on the other side of that painful journey is a peace you can't imagine while you're still in the middle of it. Trust yourself. Your instincts aren't wrong. Your feelings are valid. And you deserve so much more than crumbs of affection from people who should love you wholly. What would you do if your family chose your betrayers over you? Have you ever had to choose between keeping toxic family or keeping your sanity? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and building authentic relationships. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself even when everyone else chooses against you.